So Paul is preaching to both the wise and the foolish. I understood this as because we're all human. So sometimes we make wise choices and sometimes we sin. And so the foolish are in the Bible are considered people who reject wisdom. Okay? Are considered people who do the opposite of what God is asking them to do. The thing is that sometimes, I was thinking about this when I was preparing this chapter, and I was thinking we're not all the time wise. Okay? So this is why I understand, and I might be wrong on this, but I understand this piece as he's preaching to both wise and foolish people, because we have moments where we trust God and then we have moments where we don't. And I've seen that with Abraham, where he trusted God with Isaac, but then he didn't trust God when Sarah said sleep with Haggai, and he didn't trust God when they went to Pharaoh and he gave his wife to Pharaoh, so that as Pharaoh's wife, so that he didn't die, or that he wasn't killed in Pharaoh's land. And so the thing is that and that's foolish. He could have chosen to trust that God would protect both Sarah and himself, but God still considered Abraham righteous because Abraham believed in God and followed him to the best of his ability. So the thing is that there were wise choices and there were foolish choices. So I said as he's preaching to people, but in the Bible it does say for people who reject wisdom and for people who reject God, they are seen as foolish. But notice that they don't say they're stupid, and they don't say they're silly, and they don't say they'll be rejected forever. What they're saying is that they're foolish because they're choosing their responsibility to not follow God and to not accept God's grace. So it can mean that they haven't been taught who Jesus is, but if they have and they're still saying that Jesus is not a person and God is not a high power, then they are seen as foolish in God's eyes. But it's not a judgment on them. God is just saying that they're rejecting me, so they are foolish. Okay? Paul is saying, I am eager to teach the gospel to the wise and the foolish, to all who are in Rome. Okay? So meaning, because what he's saying is he's longing to go to Rome. He can't go to Rome, which is why he's writing them a letter, because he's sitting in jail. But he longs to go to Rome to teach the gospel to those who are wise and foolish. Okay, it also says, one of the headings in chapter 1 says, God's wrath on unrighteousness. And then the righteousness shall live by faith. So we have the righteous who are Christians and the unrighteous who are choosing not to follow Christ. Okay? I'm not ashamed of the gospel. It's power of God for salvation to everyone who believes, to the Jews and the Gentiles and the Greeks, from faith for faith. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven, all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who by their unrighteousness suppress the truth. Okay, so that I understand is somebody who has heard about the gospel and has heard about Jesus Christ and God, and they say it's not true. I reject it. The Bible considers them foolish and unrighteous. But it doesn't mean that they'll forever be that way, and it doesn't mean that God won't give them a second chance. It just means that God considers people who choose to reject him as foolish and unrighteous. God has shown these men the truth. That's what Romans says. Okay, so it's saying that God has shown these men the truth. And his creation has been perceived since the creation of the world. Okay, so with God breathing the world into being, and you can see how land is growing and fruit and vegetables are growing on the land. God is providing rain for that. God is providing people to look after the land. That is creation. God has provided the livestock for people to eat from, and people to make babies, to make more people, to have God's people as Israel. So that is God's creation that man can see, and if they're still actively rejecting, then they're seen as foolish. Okay? They knew God, but they did not honor God or thank him. So I'm going to say one more thing for tonight, and then I'm going to record the rest, the last 2 videos tomorrow. But they're saying that they became futile in their thinking. They became foolish in their hearts, and because they became foolish, their hearts were hardened. And they started using birds, animals, and creepy things. It's weird that my Bible describes it as creepy things, such strange things to worship instead of God. So on one hand, you have people who are rejecting God, because remember I said the headings are the wrath of God on the unrighteous, and then the righteous shall live by faith. So the unrighteous are people who are actively rejecting God, even though He has proven that He is God through His creation. Now for those who are righteous, meaning are Christian, but they've forgotten the God that they serve, so they're creating their own gods, birds, animals, creepy things, okay? Their hearts have been hardened for whatever circumstance that they're in, and their thinking has strayed from godly thinking, trusting in God, having faith in God's ways to provide for them, things like this. And so they're not honoring Him because they're worshipping other gods, and they're also not thanking Him for what they have been provided with. Okay, so with that in mind, I also want to say sometimes us Christians do that. I know that I do. I forget to thank Him for things that I've been given today. I forget to thank Him for things that I was given a year ago, for my gifts that He's grown within me. I forget to thank Him, and I focus on other things and make other things a priority. And as much as those other things might not be huge sinning things, like reading a book instead of reading the Bible, or going for a jog in the mountains and then not making time for listening to a sermon, things like that, they're not necessarily sinful things, but I'm not necessarily centering my heart and my spirit on Him. And what He's saying is that these people are not honoring Him. And so what He's saying is you go from faith for faith, as in you need to focus on faith, you need to choose it, it's your responsibility, and it's for the sake of your faith. Because if your faith shakes, you're going to get distracted, you're going to be influenced by the things of this world, like financial strain, relationship fighting, needing to change a job, I don't know, for whatever, anything that life can throw at you, or somebody hurting you unintentionally, and your thinking changes, and your focus changes, and you forget to trust God, and you forget that it's only by faith that we can move forward in our relationship with God. And we forget that if we focus on the kingdom, everything else will fall into place, and we don't. And I know that I don't. And so what they're saying, and this is why Paul is saying that he's preaching to both saved and unsaved, to both foolish and wise, because we are all foolish from time to time, but we're also wise. And the only way to remain faith to faith and focused on wisdom is the Bible, is prayer, and is fellowship.